So a couple quick announcements before we dive in with Bijou. Uh, Remote guidelines, please raise your hand if you want to speak and I'll call on you in order. And if you have any immediate or pressing questions, type them in the chat function. And if you're speaking, please, please, please turn on your camera. It is super helpful to us. And unmute only when you begin to speak, and all classes are being recorded. Reminder on lecture prep questions, we're getting down to the end now. We'll flash the schedule in a second, but you only have a couple weeks left, and you need to make sure to submit 2 by May 10th. So pay attention and make sure that you get some in the next couple weeks if you haven't thus far. Also a reminder on the final, it will be a take-home with 1 week to complete. Our last lecture is on May 10th. Then you will have a week to complete, and it's due by May 17th. There is no class on May 17th, but the final is due at that time, so you can keep that in mind when you're building out your travel plans for the end of the semester. Student evaluations are live. They went live today, and they're live through May 7th. I and all of your professors appreciate any feedback you provide, so please be sure to fill them out. Quick flash of my social media accounts. You can always follow me on Instagram at Prof Caroline FIT, and on Twitter, Faces and Places FIT. And we also have a Facebook fan page as well as my YouTube channel. Here is the flash of the schedule. As I said, we're getting down to the last few. So today we have Bijou Abiola, who's joining us from L'Oréal as the Director of Consumer Insights and Strategy. She also has a wealth of experience throughout the industry as a buyer. Next week, Oana Botez is joining us. She's a costume designer in theater, opera, and dance. Week 13, Rachel Landy, who is Vice President of Global Merchandising, is joining us from Kate Spade. And week 14, which is our final lecture on May 10th, will be with Fashion Service Network, which will be a host of panelists discussing their roles in supporting the industry. So with that, I want to introduce you guys to Bijou. She's an economist turned merchant turned and DDF. I think I maybe cut out there for a minute, so I'm going to backtrack for a second. As the lead merchant for brands like Chanel, Dior, YSL, Ralph Lauren, and DVF, Bijou's collective experience across luxury apparel and beauty produced a differentiation strategy that delivered over $220 million in sales. After attending Harvard Business School in 2019, Bijou's focus expanded into developing enterprise-wide corporate strategies. In her newly created role within the L'Oréal Luxe digital division, she leverages her love for data to drive a consumer-first marketing approach across the L'Oréal suite of brands. Outside, hopefully she can make it all work.
Can you see me?
Yes, now we can. Hi.
Okay, hi. You know, I just realized that the Wi-Fi in the office is terrible. It's so good to see you.
You too.
Longest time.
Yes.
Yeah, same.
So I would love for you to just kick off with talking a little bit about your career path and the roles you've held.
Yeah, definitely. So can you hear me? You can see me, right? Because I've never used this platform before, and the Wi-Fi is terrible. So anyway, good to see you again. I haven't seen you in years, but thanks for having me on, and thanks for having me be in the class today. So like you said, I've had like this long, expansive experience in retail, right? I was not expecting to be in retail. I started sort of as an economist at the UN, like very young, I think I was like 22. But then really wanted to be in the business side of something, whether it was finance or fashion. And I chose fashion because I was like 22 and it made more sense. And as you know, Lord & Taylor and Macy's and a lot of these guys have executive training programs. So I got into the Lord & Taylor one. I thought it was going to be a short stint. I was like, I'll be out of here in like 2 years and go back to business school. And that never happened.
Yeah.
And I just kind of kept going. I started out as an assistant. kind of like a merchandise business analyst, and then an assistant buyer for a few years, and got promoted into buyer for the designer brands shortly after. And I think I was a buyer for about 5 years, or about 4.5 years, before deciding like I wanted to go back to business school finally. So I got my executive MBA, got into HBS, and shifted from true buying into more strategy work. So came out of business school, stayed with HBC, which owned Lord and Taylor at the time, and eventually sold it. Stayed with them for about 2 years, so held two different roles, and now I am 6 months in at L'Oréal. So that's a bit of my journey.
That's great. Can you explain to the students what an executive MBA program is?
Sure. So basically, an executive MBA it's like an MBA, but you are doing it as an executive. So meaning like you're not going full time. So it's usually 1 year instead of 2 years. You are working and doing it. So a lot of people say, after like 27, 28, like, do you really want to take 2 years off and lose that income and go pay like $200,000 for an MBA? So a lot of people tend to pick the executive MBA route. So generally it's for people who want to do two things, who want to like advance in their career like myself, or who are really senior in their career and they are just trying to like pick up like leadership and executive skills. So I would say it's very much for people who have at least like about 10 years of experience working. And that's the difference between that and say like a regular MBA that's like, you can come right out of college, or 2 years out of college, or 3 years out. So it's more senior, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So how has it been switching from women's apparel into beauty?
I miss it. I miss it, Caroline. You were in like this world for so long from an apparel perspective. Like there's nothing like the product and going into, market and picking things and saying like, I want this shirt in blue versus white. Like if you're a true fashion lover, like being in apparel is great.
Yeah.
I think for me in beauty, it's been so different, but it's fine because in beauty, I'm in a role in beauty that's very much about the strategy and not necessarily the product. So I don't necessarily get to miss it because I'm not necessarily working with product here.
Yeah. So it's a different role as well.
It's a different role. I knew I had to get away from product because I didn't want to be like a DMM or anything. So I knew I had to kind of inch away from product. And it's been like 2.5 years. I haven't worked with product for at least 3 years now. So it's fine. Yeah.
Can you tell us why you didn't think you wanted to be a divisional merchandise manager?
Honestly, it just felt like they were babysitting buyers. Like my love for product was why I was a buyer. And so if I was getting out of that and I couldn't be in the market making those decisions, it kind of lost its appeal for me to be on the buying side. And I had this, like, remember, I like have this economics background, and like I had always wanted to do more strategy type roles. So honestly, it just made sense to kind of leave altogether.
Yeah.
Now I feel like, there are other roles you can have, right? Like if you go on the brand side, like you were, where you can still work with product and be at a more senior level. But I kind of wanted to try something else. So
yeah, that's great.
So far, so good. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about what a consumer insights team does?
Yes, I'm still figuring that out. So essentially, there's just so much changing right now with the consumer. Like, definitely what you see is with the rise of digital, with the rise of social media, like the way consumers behave with our products today is so different than it did like even just 5 years ago, right? So, and by that I mean, today she wants one thing, tomorrow she wants something else because TikTok made her buy it. And so it's like, it's constantly shifting, and the demographics of that consumer, the ethnicity of that consumer, so age, ethnicity, product preferences, those things are constantly changing. So an insights team is very much at the forefront of that and is constantly digging into the data and saying, hey, by the way, brand A, your insights have completely, I mean, not insights, your demographics are changing. Like, don't go after that older customer, come after the younger one, because we're noticing that younger customers are starting to gravitate towards your brand. So those are the kinds of things that we do on a day-to-day basis. But then we also sort of like set out like holistic strategies, right? So it's like, okay, as a business, like who do we go after? Like, so it's very much about who's shopping with us today and who do we want to shop with us tomorrow. And so that's what the team is very much focused on.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What's been your favorite part of the role?
I would say favorite part about the role has been the learning. So just learning new things, right? Because like from being a buyer to this, it's completely different. I feel like every day there's something new to learn, which I love learning. And then I'd say also just like that aha moment that you see the brands get when you present them with something that they didn't know before. So it's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this, or no idea. You feel like I just told you something like this great secret. So that's been a very interesting part of the role for sure. Is getting to the knowledge first and also learning at the same time.
Yeah, makes sense. How about a least favorite role? Part of the role.
Definitely not being able to deal with product, but that's like not unique to being, I think that's just unique to being in beauty and being in my other strategy roles before this one. It's I miss the product, I miss it, but I don't know if I'll ever fully get back there. We'll see.
Yeah. And have you found your role here to differ across different beauty categories, or does it feel pretty uniform across?
I think it's pretty uniform. When you say different beauty categories, you mean like would my role be different if I was doing something like CeraVe or something? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like something that's skincare, something that's more makeup related.
No, it's all the same. It's all the same. Because within what I do now, obviously, we have brands that have all major categories: skincare, makeup, fragrance, etc. It runs the gamut. So insights are definitely similar. Yeah.
So it looks like you're at the office.
I'm at the office. I am. Yes.
How has this year been with COVID? How are you going in every day or?
No, I'm not going in every day. So L'Oréal has been great. Like we have a very flexible work schedule. So you can come in, so they're groups. So I go in every other week. So I'm really never in the office more than 6 days a month. And even then I don't have to be in, but this is my week. And I obviously know I was going to be chatting with you guys today. And Mondays are always good to just kind of like remember you have to go into work. So I came to work for that. Yeah.
Well, and is that all the time that L'Oreal's that flexible, or is it because of COVID?
I don't know. I started in the middle of COVID, and I definitely feel like they have been, I mean, I've only ever worked at like 2 different companies, so to speak. But I've been really impressed with just how flexible they are, how accessible they are. Like it's a big company, and I've never worked anywhere this big before.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what a typical week looks like for you.
In this role.
As long as you've been there in this role, yeah.
Honestly, I feel like there is no typical week. So I'll say this, at the end of the month, so at the start of a new month, it's really digging into the data from the month prior. So my role is very much heavily involved in the marketing function, right? So even though it's a digital role, because most of our direct to consumer is online, I think only one of our brands has a store front. So it's digital in the sense these are online transactions, but from a day-to-day, it really is just kind of looking and so there's 2 parts. There's the strategic part, which is, all right, how are we preparing for the future? How are we understanding who the customer is now so that we can prepare for the future? So that's a lot of like decks and meetings and strategizing, right? And then there's the who's the customer today, and that's so I actually happen to have a team, small team, but sorry, I thought I muted my chat. It's a small team, but it's a team of analysts, right? People who are very good with data and SQL, and they're used to going into massive databases to kind of extract the information and work in there. So that's my team, and I don't necessarily know how to write SQL. I'm learning it as we speak. So I never fully go into the database to write any code or anything, but I can give direction on like, okay, if we join this to that, like how do we find out who this person is? Because sometimes the questions get very granular. And then another part of my role is the brands can come to me and say, hey, I want to roll out this brand or this category or this new launch or this, what do we do? Or, hey, we want to use loyalty to go after our customers. What's the strategy there? So it honestly, Caroline, changes every day.
Yeah.
It's been like that for 6 months.
That's exciting. That's why I always ask, whenever I ask that question, I use it in quotes because I know that in fashion, there's really never a typical week, I feel like.
No, I feel like the only time that used to be kind of typical was like market, right? So like during market, you were writing your plans and then going into the market to buy and then having to turn in your orders. But then like a regular day was never really regular. Just it could be a bunch of things. Yeah.
So actually, can I ask you the same question for when you were in your buying role?
Yeah.
What a typical week would kind of look like.
Definitely. So September, January, and June almost all look the same. Because so I think when I worked with you, I was doing kind of like that young contemporary piece of things. So that had less fashion shows, more like magic, like big shows. But when I was in the designer world, it was truly like on the fashion week schedule. So you would go to market, you go to fashion week, and then there'd be market the following week, and a lot of times the orders were due the week after. And because a lot of those brands were like those orders are usually due before most of the other like mass produced brands, so it was a very quick turnaround schedule. So typical week would be, looking at my plans. Okay, I want to do 30 million in sales this year. That's equal to like 70 million in receipts. Like, how am I going to spend that money across my 15 brands? Like, I've just gone to Donna Karan and they look so much better than Ralph Lauren. So even though Donna was going to be, 10 million of my 60 million, I think I want to spend 15 million on that. So then I have to cut back from one. So there's a lot of that. And I didn't really know what I wanted to buy until I was in the market. So really just being in there, understanding what the trends were going to be, and then saying, you know what, I think that this brand is more indicative of what people are going to want come like spring 2022 versus like this other brand. So it was a lot of like shifting. But yeah, so that was a typical week in the plans, in the market, turning around orders. That was a typical week.
So a lot of the students in this class are planning to go on and either launch their own companies or be designers. Although I always have a few people who are interested in beauty, which is why I make sure to get beauty guests in. And I always have, a few people who are thinking about styling or, different directions like that. My question actually would be, your role as a buyer from a department store, how often were you actually interacting with designers? And what would you say like made someone really great to work with for you?
I would say, honestly, like I'm trying to think. So I'm thinking back to like my Calvin Klein days when Francisco would like come in the showroom, right? That was like amazing, right? Because Francisco Costa, he was like in there asking me what I think about his collection. Or even like Tracy Reese was always in her showroom. So I'd say it depended on the brand. So I got to work with the designers, or at least like the bigger the brand, the less likely I was to kind of get what I wanted. But I think when we worked together, it was like, you know what, can you make that dress in white and yellow as well, right? And you somehow work your magic and get them to make it in white and yellow as long as I could buy the minimum quantities. So I think it still varies today. I think the bigger brands, obviously, the less access you have. But if you have the order, like if there's MOQs, minimum order quantities, and you can hit that, then by all means make it, burgundy instead of black.
Yeah.
Make it work. Yeah.
That's great. What do you feel like? Sorry, could you describe for me like what an entry level job would be in your department? What
in this role now?
Someone coming right out of college.
Honestly, it would be purely analytical, like someone with strong data analytic skills, so strong SQL skills, strong analytic mindset. So you might not necessarily be able to, because that's why my role exists, right? Is to take the insights and then turn them into some sort of action strategy. But I'd say if you're just coming out of college, knowing how to code, if there's anyone on here who's open to learning something new. I mean, the girl that reports into me now, she taught herself how to code. She was an English lit, or she did nothing related to analytics, and she learned it along the way. So I definitely feel like that's such a huge skill. And like even now, but I'm looking to expand the team, it's like that's a huge skill set to have for sure.
Totally. And what about your first job in fashion? What did that look like?
As an assistant planner, it was like basically keying POs. Like the buyer would be like, okay, I want like 500 of this from Ralph Lauren. Can you put it in the order system so that they get the order? And I'd be like keying it in. So it was not as glamorous. Like obviously, like any fashion job, you end up kind of paying your dues, right? So that you end up like rising through the ranks. But at the end of the day, it's so well worth it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So a hard question probably. Can you tell us about a time in your career when you failed at something really badly and how you grew from it, what you learned from it?
I know. I was thinking about that one. I feel like honestly, this is gonna sound like a cop-out answer, but like I feel like it was constantly about failures and wins, right? So you buy a collection and you put a lot of money into it because you saw everyone was gonna want split front pants, and you went after this program comes in the store and like no one's buying it. And then you have to mark it down and get some VA money from the vendor to pay for the stuff that you bought like by mistake. And that was constantly a case. And honestly, it was just a way to learn about sort of how not to buy the next time, right? So I think as a new buyer, like I always wanted to go with like what my gut was telling me. And I
Yeah.
basically learned you have to go what your customer is telling you and what the numbers are telling you and not your gut necessarily. So yeah, it's a cop out answer, but failing happened very regularly.
Yeah.
Buyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing I hear from my students in this class a lot throughout the semesters is just that it's challenging when you are an artistic mind to be so focused on what the consumer wants when you go out into the industry and you're working for a company. And that's the way you're going to make money. But I feel like have had this focus on consumers throughout your whole career. And, I don't know if you can share for them why you think that is so important and how you have, been inspired through that.
Yeah, no, I get them though. It's always that like, it's like you're talking to the design team when I did private brands and they want to put like ruffles everywhere and you're like, no one's going to wear that. Like I know it came to you in a dream last night that this is like the new thing, but no
Yeah.
no one's gonna wear that, right? And it's hard because for the designers it's a passion project, it's something that they're passionate about, they feel strongly about, but everything has to be adaptable to the general public, and especially when you're selling mass, right? So when you're a true designer brand like Prada or Louis Vuitton or whatever, you have the luxury of making something that no one's going to buy, because really no one's going to buy it because it's like no one
You're
can.
gonna make 12 units and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna make 12 units and no one cares. But when you're buying like Ralph Lauren, it's so important that you, as a designer, are making things that the customer is showing you year after year that she likes from you, whether it's like the crew neck t-shirt or your classic striped t-shirt. It's boring as a designer to get out the same things over and over. I think something that would always happen for a lot of these brands is like you had your core, right? So if your core made up like 60% of your sales, then yes, make the boring stuff in core, but then have fun with the 40% and let
Yeah.
the buyer come in and determine sort of what they wanted to do. Did they want to buy more fashion and less core? Or like what was their strategy for that season? So it
Yeah.
really just depends. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And I feel like a strong designer would really be listening to a strategy team, as much as they could, picking up on the history that exists, but also picking up on what.
I think I lost you.
I don't know if that was me that cut out or you. Sorry.
I don't know. I think you said last thing I heard you say was like that's part of the strategy of a good designer is picking up on the strategy team, and
Yeah.
then I lost it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I think as a strong designer, and sorry if I'm repeating myself and you guys heard part of what I said, but as a strong designer, you're going with your gut, you're going with your artistic vision, you're picking up on things you're seeing people wearing on the street or things that you see in really high fashion that think are inspired as a trend, but you're also listening to what selling data is telling.
Yeah.
Did she break up again, or is that just...
Oh, yes, I think it's her.
Okay, I was wondering.
Can you guys still hear me?
Students, is it me or Bijou?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear her, but not me. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, well, switching gears, can you tell us about something that you felt was like the most successful thing that you have done in your career?
I would say taking risks. Like that's just, it's pretty broad, but I would say like, I've risked switching 3 times into things I knew absolutely nothing about. And that has been very rewarding, scary, but rewarding. And I think even going back to business school, going back to business school, I definitely, I'm so glad I did that because it kind of gave me the break that I needed. I'd been in this like world of fashion for so long and thought the way the fashion people think and, like turn my nose up at the stuff that the fashion people turn their nose up to. But going back to business school, meeting a whole new group of friends and people, like really expanded my worldview. And it's what I really, really wanted. And so in terms of something I'm proud of, something I feel like I've done well, it is making the decision to go back to school and pivot my career for sure.
That's great. So you touched a little bit before on what the Executive MBA program is, but can you tell us a little bit about what it was like in practice?
Yeah, it was stressful because you're essentially you're working and you're in school at the same time, right? So guys, can you hear me? Because I think Caroline's frozen again.
Yep, I can hear
Can you guys hear me? Okay, cool. So, you're working full time, but you're also in business school. And so you end up having to kind of like split the same amount of time, but like towards class. And in my program, we had to go on campus like for 2 weeks, extensively, like every couple of months. So I think I did that 3 times over the course of the year. And during the time you could barely work, but someone had to do your job. So, and remember I said people were all over the world. So we had to work on something called the Alumni Challenge. And I had people on our team. We had someone in Dubai. We had someone in, where is that place? Anyway, we had people all over the world, Asia, Middle East, Africa, and collaborating time meant we needed to work on the project we had someone in London. So typically like our project meet times were 6 a.m. New York time because that was the only way that everyone could make it. So it was very stressful, but honestly the reward far outweighed the stress of it all.
Yeah. So you definitely it was worth it.
And we like partied more than we actually like. It was like people who just like totally missed their college days. So whenever we were back on campus, we definitely had way more fun than I had bargained for, but it was great.
Yeah. And you haven't been out done from that super long, but you mentioned your relationships before. I don't know if you have any ways that you've been able to lean on that network already.
Absolutely. Like I remember when I was thinking about taking the role at L'Oréal, like I reached out to my network of people to talk about like negotiating or to talk about like the positioning of this company in the world, and some of them even connecting me with people internally. So it's been great, like very good.
Yeah. Is there anything you would have done differently in college that would have prepared you better for your retail path?
Honestly, so I went to undergrad and I went to grad school, right? If I knew if I knew then what I know now, I would have gone to probably a better undergrad. Because I mean, I moved here from Nigeria, so I went to like a city university, and then I went to Columbia. I wouldn't have gone to grad school because I didn't end up becoming an economist, right? I would have just like gone to undergrad, joined the retail industry, and then gone on to get an MBA or an executive MBA down the line.
Yeah.
Because now I have like 3 degrees and I'm probably only using 2 of them. I mean, I feel like my grad degree did help me in terms of just, I was young, so it was good to have that, but I would have loved to have saved that $100,000 if I could from going to Columbia.
Yeah.
If I knew that I'd be doing this today. Yeah.
I do think that it's smart in general to work a little and figure out what you want to do before you go invest in
Yes, I agree.
Is best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally agree with that. So in your current role, you're the first person to hold that title, which is always interesting. How has it been forging your own path?
It's been great, actually. I have to say, I was very nervous coming in, new company, new role. And because it's such a need, everyone has been so open to whatever it is that, this team is able to serve up. And it's great because it's really anything in life is what you make of it, I have to say. Like, at first I was like, can I do this role? Do I want to do this role? Is it, I went through this for like months, actually.
Yeah.
And then I started leaning into it, and I was like, you know what, this is the perfect role for me because I have this like love for understanding the consumer. What better role to do that? So I think once I started to rephrase it as more of like in line with my passion and understanding what that passion is, it changed how I kind of approached the role. And then even like collaborating with the business, right? So if I have a brand or a couple of brands that I'm really interested in what they're doing, like working with those brand leads and saying, hey, like, can I sit with you as you do this? And that's the thing about the culture here. People are very collaborative. So it's like I could be a brand lead tomorrow if I wanted to because I've had a chance to sit and work with those guys now for the past few months.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So what are some successful training tools that you've developed over the years to improve your staff as a manager?
Honestly, it's varied. I would say some of my teams have gone back to actually like schools like FIT, right? To like learn certain, like we used to have this FIT program at Lord and Taylor, and now the person that reports into me is actually going to an FIT program. The master's on I think like beauty or something. I don't know what it's like a niche master's program that people here tend to do. So I would say the team development piece is just understanding what that person wants to do. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, what do you want to do? If you don't want to, get a master's in this, what do you want to learn how to code? Do you want to learn how to do Python because you know how to do SQL, but you don't know how to do Python? I think some companies are really good at having a suite of developmental tools. So this is one of them. Like you name it, we've got it, and it's right there waiting for you. And so definitely, it's just more stirring them in the direction that they want to go in. So I don't know if that answers the question really clearly, but it's like understanding what the need is. Some of my team, I've managed like really experienced people and I've managed like people straight out of college. And so everyone needs a different leadership style when it comes to just like how you work with them. So that's been, I think, the learning journey over the past few years.
Yeah. Actually, flipping that question a little bit, can you tell us about what you think has made someone a great manager of you, and who, what's inspired you over the years?
Yeah, I'd say the best managers for me have been people who really champion my growth, like people who really, am I frozen?
No.
I don't know.
No.
Okay. People who really, ask me, what do you want to do? How do I help you get there? Like it's definitely been very much about leaders who have leaned into what I want to do and stirred me in one direction or the other. I'd say my favorite person that I've worked with is a guy named Steve Gold. He's the Chief Technology Officer for Hudson's Bay, so my old company. And he was the one that said, hey, come on into tech. Like he took a chance, he took a risk. So I say the best leaders are the ones who don't necessarily look for like, you fill this role exact 100%, but we see the potential for you to grow into this other role.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So what do you feel like is your number one piece of advice for anyone who's looking to get into beauty at this time?
Oh my gosh. The number one piece of advice is just learn as much as you can. Like beauty is changing so fast and there are all these indie brands and they're all out there. Like I would say so many people generally want to come work for the big guys like, us, but if you get a job at a smaller guy, totally fine. Like it's just, or even if you get a job at like a CPG company, like, the Colgate Palmolives of the world, that's also fine. I think, fast moving consumer goods are all kind of the same in terms of they move quickly, they're like heavy replenishment. So you can learn the same thing across the board, regardless of like if you can sell toothpaste, you can sell lipstick, right?
Yeah.
So it's very much I would say stay open. Don't just focus in on like, I want beauty. I think like fast moving consumer goods in general is where you can explore. I think we lost Caroline again.
Sorry about that.
Are you there?
I think I froze
That's
again.
okay.
Sorry.
That's fine.
I don't know what makes it do it. It's so funny how it works, but thank you. That was great. With that, let me turn it over to the students for a little bit. I know that there's a lot of questions out there. If you guys want to raise your hands. Anna, you want to kick off?
Yeah, and thank you for being here. What are you noticing in your role, what it means to be analyzing, I guess, beauty brands that are either celebrity backed, or just like, what are you finding when I feel like the makeup industry is becoming very individual, but they're on their TikToks, you're on your Instagram, you have your YouTube channel. But
So you're
yeah,
saying what am I finding in terms of the analytics?
Yeah, are you finding it, I guess maybe since you are new to your like position in a way with beauty, but how do you all have to analyze, I guess, such a growing way of like selling makeup on social media?
That's a great question. I think we're still learning it. The truth is, this is why roles like this are needed, right? Because you can be spending a lot of your money on something called paid search, which is like when the customer goes into search for something, but really we're getting a lot of our customers through social. So then you have to pivot into social. So it really, like, how do you sell things on these platforms? I think it's one thing. It's like one, finding out where the customer is. Like, I remember I'm gonna post something on LinkedIn where I was like saying to someone that interviewed me last summer, I was like, I don't even know if you can buy things on TikTok, and well, now you can, or at least like you don't even need to have a checkout function. It's just like the way TikTok works, right? So to answer your question, like we're just learning as we go along and pivoting as we go along in terms of how the budgeting works and where we put the money, but I'd say the number one thing is being very flexible, right? Like being flexible and like moving things as quickly as you can and not just saying, okay, I plan to spend this amount of money here, so that's all I'm going to do. It's like, no, I'm shifting that into this bucket of social media because I'm seeing that's where the customer is coming from. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but it's about pivoting. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's such a new thing anyway for everybody, but it's all what we're absorbing right now. So it's interesting.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
The Wild Wild West, although I don't know, it's getting more and more mature by the day. So,
Mm-hmm.
Jacqueline, how about you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So in the fashion industry, it's just been like a really popular trend that sustainability and ethics are really important when consumers are buying products. So I'm just curious if that's like a trend you've noticed in the beauty industry as well, if consumers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in general, like, the Gen Z demographic specifically is very much about like, well, how ethical are you? And what is your board made of? And what are your fabric components? And what are your packaging components? So I feel like it's at the top of everyone's list. And for companies who aren't doing that, it's only a matter of time because this like value-based or like, I guess you call you value-based, not value like, am I getting a deal? But like the value-based consumer is increasing as share of consumer base. So it's very important for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
PM, how about you?
Hi, thanks
Hi.
for coming. I kind of have a two-part question. First, with the way that over quarantine, obviously, we saw a blast of companies and brands in industry like beauty and fashion, look to people of color and Black people to fill certain roles to provide diversity. So I wanted to know, have you seen a lot of, in the past 6 months, have you seen a lot of change in diversity in your workplace or workplaces of people that you may interact with? Or was it more so just that feeling a surface level kind of problem, or just trying to solving it surface level? And then the second part is like, what has been your biggest hurdle as a Black woman in the industry?
Those are two very great questions. I think, for one, it's been 6 months, right? Like you're right. It's been more, actually a little bit more, probably like 8 months or so since like the whole George Floyd, Black Lives Matter summer happened. And I think for me, if I'm being honest, I'm seeing a lot of people fill roles that are chief diversity officer roles, but I'm like, okay, you have a chief diversity officer, but you don't have people in the actual roles like to do them that are diverse. I think something that companies aren't getting is that you're not going to just, you can find senior level talent that's Black or Asian, specifically Black, let's focus on Black, but now you have, say there's like 10 people, you have 100 companies trying to get those same people. So it's like almost like a bidding war, right? The companies that have are going to try to keep them, and the companies that want them are going to try to do everything to get them. Where they need to focus is on the junior level talent. So it's like, all right, I'm going to go hire, if I have an incoming class of 30 people, I'm going to make sure 10 of them are Black, or maybe even 15 of them are Black, because I know that throughout their journey, I'm going to lose some, but I'm going to at least have 5 of them that are ready to be VPs in the next like 10 years, right? So it's like companies need to invest more at the start of the pipeline versus like, or start in middle versus just at the top. So to answer your question, at the surface, I think a lot of them are hiring chief diversity officers to be like, look, we're paying attention to this. But I think there's still a huge gap at the entry level. And I think that'll probably get filled with more, especially fashion and beauty, right? Like it's a very white industry, right? It's very white. There's no denying that. So I think it'll take a while for us to get like more people coming in. Does that make sense? Like coming into the pipeline to then see. I think it's going to take us at least like 3 to 5 years to see if they really did what they set out to do. And then how has it been being a Black woman in this industry? It's been tough. I'm going to be very frank. I don't mince words. I mean, I think one thing that happened last year that was good for me was a lot of people came together and started sharing their experiences, right? Because a lot of times you're just kind of working, you're like heads down, I'm not gonna focus on this because I just have to get my work done. And then last year, like people just started sharing like, and then this happened to me and this happened to me. You're like, whoa, like I should have spoken up a long time ago because this wasn't just happening to me. And I think now, because of those shared experiences, we're all more aware of microaggressions in the workplace. I think some people are hypersensitive. Like somebody says, but like, is it because I'm Black? It's like, no, you just didn't do your job, right? Like, just calm down. but I do think that that I'm even more aware, and it's tough. I think it's very tough because being sometimes like ignorance is bliss in a way, like just not paying attention to it. But now that you're so aware, you're like, when my manager says to me like, you're angry, I'm like, okay, I'm not angry, I'm just a Black woman. We emote, we're very passionate when we speak. It's like an Italian woman talking, right? Like, some cultures and some races are just very different in the way we communicate. But that being said, I think now that people are more aware, I'm finding peers and coworkers and bosses to be more sensitive in the way they communicate, because I like to believe that the majority of people don't want to be racist. The majority of people don't know they're doing things that are racist. And so as they learn, then we can get better. I think the people like yourself that are still in school and people who are like in high school graduating, coming into college, they will be the beneficiaries of a lot of what people like myself have had to go through because people would have learned from it. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Kind of to piggyback off that, actually, in your bio, you mentioned that you get engaged with speaking events to empower young women and people of color. I don't know if you can share a little bit more about what you do outside of work on that front.
I feel like it's things like this, right? Like it's really like a lot of like, hey, can you speak to my class? Hey, I have, a mentoring podcast, or hey, I have this, like about 3 years ago, I went to Nigeria because I'm Nigerian and did like this huge event for young people who wanted to be in the fashion industry, which as a Nigerian, most people are like doctors, lawyers, they're typically not in creative sectors. So it was great to kind of go out there and encourage them to sort of explore things beyond like conventional STEM careers. So it's more things like that, or like articles or interviews. So that's kind of what I spent a lot of time doing. I think last year I kind of became like the go-to on all things like what should we do race related at my old company, and I had the opportunity to start mentoring unofficially like quite a few young professionals of color through that. So yeah, that's kind of what my background is like.
Yeah.
I always say people, I'm like, I'm a woman first, and then I'm a woman of color. So anything related to women's empowerment is my kind of niche. But you know, as a woman of color, it's like a double. Used to be a double. I used to think of a double negative, but ever since I think over the past 2 years, I started thinking of it as a double positive.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Definitely. Great. Thanks. Evan.
Yes. When you were talking about working for the United Nations, it kind of made me think about how politics can be very much about like selling a story or even selling a brand. So I was curious if you felt like there was any intersect between what you did for the UN and what you've done in the fashion and cosmetics world.
I think that's a great question. I think that honestly, there wasn't much of a intersectionality in terms of like what I did there versus here, because they're not working for profit, right? So it's like that same hustle and hunger. Like, I gotta get this done because I gotta get this ordered because I gotta get this in the store. Otherwise, I'm not gonna hit my sales plan. Like, there is a hunger and like a fire in you when you're working to produce results versus like at the United Nations, it's like, all right, well, this solution, I mean, yes, there were pressing needs like, you know, humanitarian crises and things like that. But for the most part, majority of the resolutions and things that they were trying to work on were not that urgent. So the biggest difference is the sense of urgency that people have at work, working private sector, public sector. I would say the commonality is, to your point around brand and representation, everything is a brand, right? You are a brand unto yourself. William is a brand. Like when he walks in a room, people have an idea of what he's going to do, what he's going to say, just based on what he's done in the past. So I think everything has a brand component to it, and everything is about marketing and putting out an exterior that says what you want people to see. So I would say that's the commonality, but honestly, they were two very different roles.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Daria, you're next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right, my question was, what is the worst feedback you've received from a mentor or employer, and how did it help or hinder your growth?
Oh my gosh, that's probably one of the best questions I've gotten all year, and it's already like April because I have an answer. The worst feedback I ever got was from a boss who was not Black that told me that I was overly confident. She told me that I was too confident, that I walked around like the company owed me something. And this is in response to me asking for a raise. Like I had found out that I was making, I think, like $15,000 less than people in the same role. And, you know, I remember at the time feeling like really down because I knew that I deserved what that peer had, but I also got very self-conscious, and I wasn't as like, I'm someone who is naturally very confident and doesn't have it. I always say I have no shame, so I speak up. And I found myself for 2 years after that really like shying away and stepping back and not being myself and watching every single word. So it did hamper my confidence to some extent. And I think honestly, that's part of the reason I decided to go back to business school, was just to kind of regain my confidence and regain like this sense of who I was. But that was the worst feedback, and it did not help. It hurt. It hurt for a few years, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. But
Yeah.
glad you feel like you got your confidence back.
Stella got her groove back. Yes.
TM, how about you? You're back again.
Hi again. I had listened to one of your interviews, I think with the In Pursuit of Luxury, and you were kind of talking about luxury retail, and with the vaccine and how when things start to open up, there's going to be a shift, and not as many stores or storefronts are going to be needed, and the ones that do are going to have like that more elevated experience. What do you think, like especially in the beauty industry, because it's so
High touch.
yes,
Yeah.
like, what do you think they could do to improve? I used to work at Sephora, so like understanding that everything does involve close proximity, like how can you improve on that? What do you think that could be improved on that experience?
I actually just thought of something as you were asking that. So a couple of things. I think a lot of sites are going to have to move towards like virtual try-on. So being able to try on your shade online. But even virtual try-on just doesn't look right. Like you're like, okay, I look like this is not right. And you like the application process. So I do think that in a sector like beauty, that's why the influencer economy will probably get bigger in a sector like beauty, because people are going to be more reliant on like, ooh, what does that look like on her? What does that shade look like? So when things come out, like pushing that more to the influencer economy, because they're the ones that are going to be like showing it to people. And so when they go into stores, they can be more targeted in what they're asking for. And then without going into a wasteful like subsect of the industry, maybe even having like individual like try on things, right? So it's like instead of like pumping into sample like disposable things, how you have the disposables at Sephora, things like that, like moving that more in that direction. So more samples, more disposable containers, because you can't reuse things. But I feel like that might be tough because A, there's a cost component, and B, there's a waste component. I think companies are just going to have to be more lenient about their return policies, understanding that people are buying stuff online, then there's a likelihood of returning it. So factoring that into the budget more. So there's a huge impact, I would say, on beauty, especially in makeup. But right now we can't tell, right? Because are people not wearing makeup because they are not going anywhere, or are people not wearing makeup because they don't have the ability to go and try it on and store it? So it's still yet to be seen. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
And thanks for listening to my interview. You have a very prepared class here, Caroline.
Great. No, I love that. Marsha.
Hi, can you hear me
Yeah.
Yes.
and see me? Okay, sorry, I have to turn my camera on. I have one. Oh, I have like another question, but it's kind of about what you mentioned before about salary. But one question I want to ask you first though is what you think the best ways to appeal to millennials is, especially since considering that a lot of them, like in my age group and who are younger, are just starting out in their careers and also are just starting out on their own, but they obviously don't have, I guess the fixed income to be shopping in the luxury market. So if you're someone who wants to sell products that have a higher price range, what do you think the best method is to appeal to the millennial group or younger audience who most likely probably can't even afford it?
Honestly, that's a good question. I think that's why we're seeing such a huge increase in the resale market. So people going and buying, like things that other people have bought before. So if you think of companies like The Real Real or Rebag, you're seeing an increase in sort of resale market as well as rental market, so Rent the Runway. And I do think that a lot of companies are, sorry, actually, someone might want to mute, but I think a lot of companies are starting to collaborate with people like that. So if you think of Gucci collaborating with The Real Real, they are, sorry, can you mute? Maybe it's you or someone else.
I think It's maybe just a slight delay on Marsha's computer. Maybe, Marsha, you want to mute while she's talking?
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I was saying, because I want to make sure other people can hear me, because I was like, oh, I can't really hear myself. So I would say, like, companies like Gucci partnering with the Real to kind of send inventory that they have excess of is a great example of how luxury is leaning in a bit to attract that younger consumer who can't afford things. And then this year with the stimmies, like, young people were out there like buying luxury things in the stores. We call them the cash consumer because they got that money and they were just in there buying their, Gucci slides and Gucci bags. So I think this is definitely the year where we saw how much potential there was to attract the younger demographic once they had that disposable income at their disposal. So that's the first answer.
So does that mean you feel like Instagram is probably the best place to advertise compared to printed magazines?
Absolutely. I feel like Instagram, TikTok are the two primary places that you're going to reach anyone, really. Like, I mean, I get my Vogue every month, but it takes me a while before I flip through it, because by the time I flip through it, it's already old. I feel like there's already something else. So I think print has definitely taken on print is more for, coffee tables now than for like inspiration, because the inspiration is right there on your phone.
And I just want to ask one more thing about what you said earlier, because the thought came to my head. I don't know if like you're aware, but how it's kind of like a known thing where they say how women tend to make less than men because they don't ask for it, because they tend to settle quicker than men, who tend to be more aggressive when it comes to demanding a certain pay. And I was just wondering, like, what you thought about that. Like, why do you think that is, like, I guess, like a stigma, or is that the right word I'm
It's the
using? But, like,
reality. It's not a stigma.
why do you think they would say that about women? Like, what is it women would be thinking when they would be afraid to, because you mentioned just now before how they were like, you're overconfident because you're asking for a certain, but I do know that there are some women that don't probably seize that opportunity, but I feel like at the same time, it's like it's not going to be given to them, just because I personally myself have experience where I had a job where there was actually a white male who was getting a job that was, I guess, in a different league, but I had about like a couple more years of experience than him. And then during the orientation process, I peeked over at his paper and I saw his pay was actually $1 more than mine. And I was like, what? And this was at Club Monaco. So I was like, I know I need to get the hell out of here, because it's already proven right in my face that there's some kind of disparity here. So I guess, yeah, like what I'm saying is, I know for a fact that women do get paid less, but why do you feel like they think that women don't ask for more, if that makes sense?
I think the research is there and the science, like, it's obvious women don't ask for more. I think women generally, I'll give you an example. I was in a meeting where, and I won't say which company or where or when, but I was in a meeting where there were guys starting in the role and there were women starting in the role. And when it came time to introduce themselves, the men were like, yeah, looking forward to doing X, Y, and Z, looking forward to working with you guys. And the women were like, happy to be here. Thanks for, basically like thanking them for hiring them, right? So women tend to feel like just glad to have a seat at the table, whereas men are like, I'm grabbing that seat at the table. So it has a lot to do with just the way that society rewards men versus women, right? Especially women who are getting to that childbearing age, who like want to take a step back and work like with their families versus in the corporate world. A lot of times when they're coming back into corporate America, they tend to feel like they are less valuable because they might not be able to dedicate as much time as they did before having children. So there are a number of reasons why women, I would say, undersell themselves. But I think it's just it is a man's world to some extent. And unfortunately, the biases that exist reward men versus women in terms of, when it comes to pay, to the pay gap. So, and then when you do go and ask, right, and you're told no so many times, you tend to ask less and less. I mean, unless you're like me, I just keep asking until I get what I want. But even coming to this role, I did not negotiate as much as, say, my male counterpart would have, because it's the sense of, thank you for having me. It's like, no, thank you for having me. Like, you should be happy that I'm here versus me being happy that you've hired me. Does that make sense? Like, we tend to have the wrong mindset.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you. That's what I thought too. But I see you're in like a very good position. So like I know this getting there probably wasn't easy, or was it for like your personality? It was
No, it was.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bijou.
No problem.
And it's interesting because it's an industry that our industry is an industry where there are actually probably more women than men, but the C-suite doesn't necessarily represent that. So it is really interesting to see how it changes as you move through the ranks, and hopefully there's a sea of change coming. There's a lot of talk about everything, and I think everyone's getting their voice for the first time.
Yeah, I think, as we see more female leaders take C-suite positions, that will change, right? And the science is there, the research is there. Women leaders just do things differently. Outcomes are better. If you look at even with the COVID crisis, the president of New Zealand, everyone was applauding him. Like, women think through a lot of things that men don't necessarily think through, and just facts.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Azat, we have you next.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. It's really nice to hear you and hear this all information. My question is, I don't know, maybe you shared already, you said something about that already. I missed that. So what was a recent a project that rolled down with some fashion, like a fashion brands or fashion companies you remember and want to share, like maybe that's fashion shows or fashion like programs or something? Yeah, just if you know something like recent projects.
I think it's not necessarily fashion shows. I think, and it wasn't so recent. It was probably now like 4 years ago or so. You wanted to bring in a brand which was owned by Top Miss Selfridge to the U.S. and they didn't have a U.S. distribution, and we really wanted them because we really wanted to attract that customer, that like sort of like younger millennial customer, and having to figure out how to bring a U.S. UK known brand to the U.S. that had like no recognition. They hadn't done business in the US before, so we had to figure out like tariffs, imports, conversions, all of that. That was like launching a new company from the ground up, and it was not easy, but it was great. We ended up doing $1 million in sales in the first year. So I think as far as a recent project with a brand, that's all I can think of. If I understand your question correctly, I think that's what you're asking me.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yes, yes, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks for answer.
Abby Grace, I have you next.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. My question is, as someone who's been to business school and really like evolved their career, what is the one piece of advice you would give to young creatives starting out in the industry, like looking for their first job? What is the main quality you would look for in an employer, or how you would choose who to work for, I guess?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing, and there's no way to really know this, right, when you are from the outside looking in, but it's company culture. Like, look online, research people who have left. What are they saying about the company? Do they have things that are important to you? Like, if you're passionate about diversity and inclusion, is that something they're passionate about? Ask to meet with employees in the company that are at your level, right? Because a lot of times when you're meeting with people, you're meeting with more senior people, ask to meet with someone at your level so that you can ask them like real questions. I say the biggest thing for me is a cultural fit. Like, am I a cultural fit for this organization? And the only way to find that out is through extensive research.
Okay.
Because you know the saying Instagram versus reality? That's the
Right.
same with companies as well. Like, oh, everyone wants to work for all these like big companies, but some of them are really terrible to work for. So, and you can find that out just by researching, looking things up online, and talking to people during your interview process.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, if you guys aren't familiar with Glassdoor, yeah, that's a great place to go to see reviews. Like, people, when they leave the company, will go back and write reviews about a company. Obviously, it all comes with a grain of salt because it's almost exclusively people who have left a company when they write the reviews, but you can really feel a lot for a company's culture by perusing through those before you go join. Jack. I don't know if I cut out there for a second, but I just said Jack.
Yep. Oh. So going back to that story told about the person that said you were overconfident, I've noticed that when I've spoken to people who have, like, they've graduated and they've gone in that corporate environment, and then a few of them, like, that I talked to no longer were like kind of in their field or in that environment anymore. And it seemed like a lot of them, like, the reason was that they just didn't like the whole corporate lifestyle thing. And actually, thinking back on now, all of them were women. So I was wondering if, like, the experience that you shared, or like throughout your whole career, is that something that's like sort of expected to like have to like deal with eventually when it comes to like such, like, I'd say maybe like a competitive or like aggressive work environment occasionally? Or is that like something that like maybe women encounter more often than men, you would say?
I'd say it depends. I'd say, like Caroline said, this industry is filled with a lot of women at the lower and mid-level, but a lot of men at the very, very top. So I think corporate culture is tough, and some people can't stand it, and that's why they leave and they start their own companies. But like, honestly, I'm someone who knows how to navigate corporate culture. It's kind of so. Who asked me about the politics thing? Actually, that is one similarity. It's all politics. It's all just knowing, what, if I'm going to go talk to the ambassador from the Ukraine, I need to make sure that I talk to him about something that's important to him. If I'm going to go talk to the CEO of L'Oréal, I need to make sure I find a way to plug myself in a way that's important to him. Like, oh, I see you like, I'm making this up, the Alzheimer's cause. Like, I ran a mile for an Alzheimer's race. Like, it's all politics. And so I think it's to be expected. And I think even the higher up you go, the tougher it gets, because the higher the stakes of those political allyship. But yeah, it's not fun. It sucks. But at the end of the day, some people do like the comfort of like a corporate lifestyle, right? So it's like, I get a salary, versus like when you're an entrepreneur, it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to get this amount of money this month or that. Like, you know what I mean? It just varies.
Mm-hmm. So it's like real sink or swim. If you got it, you got it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, and I think it's something you can learn. I think it's not, if you got it, you got a sense of like, some people, I think, unfortunately give up too quickly. They don't, fight more. And yeah, and I definitely feel like, yeah, someone saying they had a bad experience. Yeah, but for every bad experience you have, there's a good experience around the corner. So you just keep moving through. And then for someone like me who is a Black woman, I have to decipher how much of this is like corporate and how much of this is race related. It's like my brain is always on. It's like, yeah. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I'm just learning to just take everything with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Sorry. Cut out there for a second. I was going to add also on the corporate front. I mean, I feel like when you go to work for a strong brand, I mean, when I was at Ralph Lauren, I feel like it was I one time got a promotion, and I remember when my boss announced, like, to the group that I was getting promoted, one of the main reasons was because I embodied the brand. Like, it actually, you know, from that comment, which was the first comment that she made about why I was getting promoted, had nothing to do with me, actually. It had to do with the fact that I enjoyed wearing their clothes and representing their brand. And, you know, I've always
Suspense. Caroline, you're frozen.
I'm sorry, I know I'm cutting in and out.
You've always, sorry, you was like, I've always, you were, I think you were saying you've always questioned that comment that she made.
Yeah, but if you're going to go work for a corporation like that, I think you need to understand that that actually is a big part of it. If they have a really strong brand, they're going to be protecting it at every level, and that includes their employees and the people who work there. And they want, you know, 360 degrees of everything involved with their company to reflect their brand and their vision. So that could be a good thing, especially if you love the brand and that's something you really stand behind. But it can also be, you know, stifling if it's not the right brand for you, and it's done in an aggressive way, I guess. And that
I agree. Yeah, like I work for a company that has a very strong brand presence. So I either, like, I mean, it's just, it is what it is. I happen to fit the mold. And yeah, a lot of these companies that have strong brand DNAs have that because they control everything down to the people that work for them.
totally.
Yeah.
Hawa, you have a question or comment?
Hi. Yes, I do. So my
You just want to mute. I don't know if you know that.
sorry, my computer's acting weird today, but I'll just like have my camera off to save time. So I have two questions for you. Thanks for coming, by the way. I really appreciate you coming. My first question is, how does PR packaging work and sponsorships when you're working for an influencer when you're just starting out your own company, a makeup brand or a fashion company?
How does PR
Packaging.
I'm sorry, can you clarify for me a bit?
Like PR packaging, like when you reach out to like beauty gurus on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok people, because I know that's blowing up too. People are doing like 30-second makeup tutorials. I don't know how they're doing that, but they're doing it. But how would that go about, like reaching out to people to represent your brand or for paid
There are
sponsorship?
companies that we actually have, like people use companies that have influencers that they represent. So you go out to those companies and you say, I want influencers in this demographic that have this kind of reach, and then they push out your content to those influencers. So I don't think you're ever really, depending on how big your company is, you're never really working directly with the influencer yourself. There's
So
companies that do that for you.
So you work with a middleman and then they just scout out people. Okay.
Yeah, they already have think about it like a modeling agency. You have like your models within your agency kind of. So that if I say I want a model that's like, you know, this and that, they will just look through their books and say, all right, this is who fits the mold. Same thing with influencers. It's like, all right, they have a bunch of influencers in their books. And then I say, I want this, this, and that. Then I go from there. And sometimes, and that's why people are liking TikTok, even though I feel like it's going to change soon, is that the representation is a bit organic. So you don't even reach out to the influencer and they just naturally like your stuff and they start pushing it. And before you know it, like the brand send them stuff like, hey, if you like it so much here, and they keep, so it's a mix. Majority of it does happen through the middleman.
Okay, cool. Thank you. My second question is, what is an advice for like a MUA who wants to start her own fashion, or not fashion, a cosmetics line? Like, how would she go about it?
I don't know. I've never done it before,
Okay.
but I think it's just, you know,
Oh,
again,
you work in marketing. Sorry, you work in the marketing side of.
I work on the digital and marketing side. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it just depends. I don't know. I mean, the beauty industry is so saturated. I don't know why anyone would want to make their own, but if they did, they would have to figure out what their distribution would look like, and they'd have to be meeting a need that that isn't being met by like the Fenties and the, you know, there's so much competition out there.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions out there? Well, Bijou, thank you so, so much for joining us. This has been really insightful and definitely a different look than we've had all semester from a more...
Yeah, why? Oh, because we did the more Q&A.
Yeah, no, just because there's more like numbers focused in your job and I think data-driven decision making, but really appreciate your insight and your own personal experiences that you shared with us today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's the end of the day. I'm like, ooh, I'm so glad you guys are like how I'm ending my day. So I'm gonna like head out the office. But thank you for having me and good luck to everyone. You can add me on LinkedIn. I was telling Caroline I'm not on the gram, but you can add me on LinkedIn. The fact that I even said the gram just tells you I'm not on Instagram. But you can add me on LinkedIn, and I look forward to connecting with you guys. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks.
I'm pretty sure I cut out there for a second, so I apologize, guys. But I do have an actual survey for you today. So please fill it out. I look forward to seeing your answers, and I'm actually just going to also paste it in the chat for you for easier access. There you go. Any questions, comments, concerns for me? Let me know. Sorry for my service issues, but I'm looking forward to next week with Awana Botez.
Really quick in the survey, are we supposed to answer the why question in number 2? Because it has the it didn't option, it really did, and then why, but no like way to hit the other 2 buttons.
Oh, I guess just hit the Y then and fill in the Y. Sorry.
Okay, cool. No worries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Gordon?
Yeah.
Do the videos for the recordings on Blackboard usually go up right after class?